It seems to me that the artist's struggle for his integrity is a kind of metaphor, must be considered as a metaphor for the struggle which is universal and daily of all human beings on the face of this terrifying globe to get to become human beings. It is not your fault, it is not my fault that I write. I would never come before you in the position of a complainant for doing something that I must do.
𝚤𝚑𝚘𝚎 is dead, roses are not armor. In my neighborhood, it was become a poet or a farmer. Welcome back, Avatar. Mev levy whirling while I'm boiling a pacifier. Hold the self like Jazargo and Winterhold. Reality, I'm in Fargo, reading dinner poems, wincing at the virtue signaling. 𝚙𝚘𝚘 is 𝚑𝚘𝚘𝚎, staring at the ceiling post-coitus. Swerving through moral detours, most boisterous. Black beans of deco spilt on my loafers. I'm back on my black Bukowski bullshit. Fuck your notepad, wrote a poem with a toolkit. Shocking moment as the pupil thought me and my niggas is a school of thought. Shocking moment as the pupil thought me and my niggas is a school of thought.
I want to suggest that the poets are finally the only people who know the truth about us. Soldiers don't, statesmen don't, priests don't, union leaders don't. Only the poets. That's my first proposition. The second proposition is what I really want to get at tonight. And it sounds mystical, I think, in a country like ours and at a time like this. But something awful is happening to a civilization when it ceases to produce poets, and what is even more crucial, when it ceases anywhere whatever to believe in the report that only poets can make.
And so artists teach people to see, and I mean that literally. It's very hard to perceive the world. And so, who was the artist that made all the squares with red and yellow and white?
Oh, Piet Mondrian.
Mondrian, he's a great example. I mean, if you go downtown Toronto now, there are Mondrian buildings everywhere. You know, and so he was playing very, very carefully and intensely with these arrays of geometric shapes, you know, and that's not well, I like it, but it's not particularly decorative, and it's certainly not naturalistic or realistic. It's like, what's this crazy guy up to with all his squares? It's like, well, everything is built out of squares. So he's thinking, well, what are the interesting things we can do with squares so they shimmer and glow, and so that we get the geometric harmony proper, and it's just invaded architecture. You can see Mondrian absolutely everywhere. And so these people, so here's a way of thinking about artistic and creative people from a biological perspective. So imagine that the world is basically an explored territory inside an unexplored territory. Every world is like that. Everywhere you go is like that. There's things you know and there's things you don't know. And the conservative people like to be in the middle of the things that are known. And they can master that space, and they're good at maintaining it. But the artists like to be right out on the edge, and that's the edge between chaos and order. And they like to expand the domain of order out into the chaos. And they do that first by transforming perception. And you can see very concrete examples of this if you think about what creative people do in cities. They always do the same thing. So they're starving to death, and this is partly why, but they go in a city and they look at some ratty area that's sort of quasi-criminal and that's seen better days, and they go there and they think, you know, with a little work, this can be cool. And so then they rush in there and they build some galleries and show some art, and they civilize it a bit, and then a coffee shop pops up, and you know, the next thing you know, the yuppies move in because they're sort of creative but also kind of conservative, so they're the next ones into the frontier, and then the developers show up and they kick all the artists out. But that's okay, because then the artists go off and rejuvenate some other area, and that's what artists do, is that they're transforming chaos into order all the time. That's where they live on that edge. And so it's a very tough place to live because you can fall into the chaos at any time.
This is kind of blowing my mind, actually, because I just wrote recently in the commemorative book for the 150th here at the gallery that science helps us understand the world, whereas artists create a world that we can understand. It's just they're sort of it amounts to the same, but they're opposite approaches.
Well,
and
the artists,
you just said that.
Artists have always been on the frontier of human understanding. You know, the artist bears the same relationship to society that the dream bears to mental life. Like when you're dreaming at night, you're actually pretty creative when you're dreaming, and that's why when you remember a dream, you think, oh man, like where did that come from? Which is pretty weird, that something can happen in your head and you have no idea how it got there or what it means. That's a bloody miracle. You know, every night that happens. It's like, I had a dream. Where did it come from? What does it mean that you had it? How can you not understand it? How can you produce something like that? It's like a whole movie that you don't even understand. You produce it. You don't produce it, you experience it. The dream is the thing that mediates between order and chaos. It starts to make chaos into order. So it's half chaos. That's why it's not comprehensible. And artists play exactly the same role in society. They're the visionaries that start to transform what we don't understand into at least what we can start to see. And they've always been that. They've always been at the vanguard. That's their biological niche.
So they're creating confidence for the community.
They're the civilizing agent.
You see, but we have a tradition that comes from the first millennium BC somewhere else, and we're handling that. It has not turned over and assimilated the qualities of our culture and the new things that are possible and the new vision of the universe. It must be kept alive. The only people that can keep it alive are artists of one kind or another. That the artist is his function is the mythologization of the environment and the world.
Artist being the poet, the musician, the author,
exactly,
the writer.
Yes. And I think we've had a couple of greats in the recent times. I think of James Joyce as such a revealer of the mysteries of growing up and becoming a human being. And for me, he and Thomas Mann were my principal gurus, you might say, as I was trying to shape my own life. I think in the visual arts, there were two men who seemed to me to handle mythological themes in a marvelous way, and one was Paul Klee and the other Picasso. These two men really knew what they were doing all the way, I think, and had a great versatility in their revelations.
I mean, our artists are the myth makers of our day.
The myth makers in earlier days were the counterparts of our artists.
They drew the paintings on the walls,
yes.
They performed the rituals.
There's an old romantic idea in German, 𝙕𝚊𝚘𝚎𝚘, that's that the poetry of the traditional cultures and the ideas come out of the folk. They do not. They come out of an elite experience, the experience of people particularly gifted, whose ears are open to the song of the universe, and that they speak to the folk, and there is an answer from the folk which is then received. There's an interaction, but the first impulse comes from above, not from below, in the shaping of folk traditions.
So who would have been in these early elementary cultures, as you call them, the equivalent of the poets today?
The shamans.
Listen, if you can express your pain, that's a gift. There are people out here who are depressed and don't know. There are people out here who are down and out and don't even know. There are people who avoid difficult conversations. There are people who can't even put their emotions into a word. And then we have phenomenal people like speakers, musicians, artists, poets, rappers, who can take what we're feeling and put it into a freaking masterpiece. Y'all know how many times I came across a project by a rapper or a speaker or a singer, and I'm just like, thank you. You put it into words. Listen, people who could take their emotions and make art, you don't realize how significant you are to the world. People need somebody like you. It's a gift to be able to take something as complex as an emotion that is derived from an experience that may have hurt you, that you want to forget about, but you're able to take it and make art out of it. It could be as simple as making a TikTok. Simple as what I'm doing right now. Or it could be a song. It could be a rap. It could be a poem. It could be art, literal art. The fact that you can take something that's inside of you and bring it on the outside just shows your beauty as a human being. Please do not sleep on the fact that you can wake people up.
Is that a guitar?
Yes, it is. It's called a concha. It's made out of an armadillo shell, which was a blessing because it carries within the key numbers of the whole universe.
Really?
You also carry a universe within you.
I do?
I'm gonna sing a song for that universe.
Okay.
Chiquillewa en Sochi, chiquillewa panoyolo,
No artist is ahead of his time. He is this time. It is just that others are behind the time. Martha Graham.
God created the heaven and the earth.
Very good.
Really, what is the role of an artist? And I think lots of people have very different definitions, but Young Kendrick, again, back to Overly Dedicated and Section 80 mixtape Kendrick, and GNX Kendrick, Super Bowl, Grammys Kendrick. Has your idea of what the role of an artist is, you as an artist, has that ever changed?
I don't think I knew exactly what my role was. Early on, I had maybe clues of it, but now today I can truly say it's to express myself and express things that people can necessarily say on the daily, and for them to actually relate to, and come from the most vulnerable place where people can actually feel it. I think that is, for me, that's the role for me as an artist. I don't give a fuck what place it come from. I could be the most angry person on the record. You gon' feel that shit that day if you woke up and you felt that. You wanna smile, you gon' feel it, cause I'm gonna make sure I'm present that particular time in the studio, in the booth, that I feel happy and I feel energized, and I feel, if I feel frustrated, you gon' feel it. And to carry that as an inspiration for people that's listening that may not have a voice, that, I've grown up with cats, still to this day can't have a conversation. The most meanest, aggressive individuals, but they can't even look you in the eye and express themselves the way they want to, so they resort to other things. And when I think about that, and I know that I have the tools necessary to communicate myself properly and effectively, I gotta do it for them. I gotta make records like Reincarnated. I gotta make records like Man in the Garden. I have to, because they feel that way, but they cannot project it. And when they hear somebody actually giving them affirmations, it allows them to speak more freely and be open, because again, I come from the same place they come from.